Don't stop doing what you're doing. Where is the other person?
I don't know.
You're by yourself?
I just don't know where he is.
Excuse me?
I just don't know where he is. And our voices are showing up on the video.
Well, then we're gonna have to take a minute because I gotta straighten out, you know, what my role is here, what I'm gonna be doing here.
When you think of police and you think of military, do you think of safety? No. What are some of the things that come up? We think of rape, we think of violence, terror, we think of displacement. So these people, the police and the governments are working together and we are saying no. We are going to stop Urban Shield. The first speaker who's going to talk to us that I'm going to call up is from Critical Resistance. Please give a round of applause for Kamal Walton.
Hey everybody, how you doing today? So I'm here speaking on behalf of Critical Resistance. We're a crew that does a lot of work around the prison industrial complex. And one of the reasons why we're here today is because we understand that the policing that happens here in Oakland, the policing and militarization and the tactics that happen at Urban Shield are echoed all across the country and all across the globe. So one of the big things that Urban Shield does is train SWAT teams. And who knows where the first SWAT team was deployed? In LA, yes. On who? On the Black Panthers. So it is very clear that by sitting here and training police and training SWAT teams, what they're trying to do is train folks in subverting the dissent that we are all perpetuating in order to get healthier communities. So we know that the policing that happens in Urban Shield is supposed to be in response to quote-unquote emergency situations. But what we consider an emergency is not necessarily what they consider an emergency, right? So a black person dying every 28 hours is to us an emergency. That is not what they're training and responding to. What they're responding to is snipers and quote-unquote terrorists and all these people that are doing harm in these large-scale events. And that is not what we're experiencing here in Oakland unless you're talking about the Oakland Police Department, right? Unless you're talking about collaborations with ICE, right? So what we're talking about here today is investing in things that we actually know keep us safe. So when you think about who keeps you safe, who do you think about? Shout it out. Your family, your community, jobs, housing, yes. So education. So those are the things that we're talking about, what we want instead. We do not want more of our people put in cages. We do not want more of our people being murdered in these streets. We do not want our people to not be able to move from Mexico, from Guatemala, from Honduras to come up here and then be murdered on their way up here. We don't want our borders to be policed. We want our people to move freely. And what we don't want being exchanged is the increased tactics, the increased tools of surveillance, of policing, of violence that people learn here and then they spread this shit all across the country. So what we're here saying is we don't want Urban Shield, we want housing. We want jobs. We want our families to be safe. We want to invest in education. We want to create safe spaces for young people after 6 p.m. because we know some of our folks are working the graveyard shift. So what we're talking about here is not just stopping Urban Shield, but building up the solutions that we want to see in our communities. Because the emergency responses that they're talking about in Urban Shield are the ways that we end up in the dirt. Those are the ways that we get killed. And what we're saying is you need to be learning not only how to respond to these quote-unquote emergency situations. What you need to be learning is how not to murder black and brown people. That's what you need to be learning. And you can't learn that if you're a police officer. Straight up, that's not what they train you to do. So instead of investing in policing, instead of investing in Urban Shield, we need to be taking that money and actually investing in our communities. So it's not just about resisting, it's about educating ourselves on where this money is coming from, interrupting that shit, and taking it back and putting it in our communities. So thank you everyone for coming out. I'm excited to continue these conversations because we know that Urban Shield has been happening here for the past 8 or 9 years, and we know that they plan on putting it together next year. So what we need to continue to do is not just show up today, but talk about how we're going to tear this shit down tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. So I'm excited to see y'all here today, and I'm excited to see you tomorrow as well.
I'm going to call a very close comrade of mine with Anak Bayan. She actually had the pleasure of doing an exposure trip back to the Philippines. Please welcome Alexa from Anak Bayan, East Bay. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay, hold up. This is in Tagalog. Magandang hapon. Magandang hapon. Masa Akair. Yeah? Okay. Buenas tardes, friends, family, comrades. Thank you, Irma. I'm Alexa from Anak Bayan, East Bay. We're an organization that's rooted in the Philippines, but we're in solidarity with our comrades fighting for national, genuine liberation in the Philippines. And we know that Urban Shield is not just here, it's not just our local police. It's, as Tina said, as Sharif has said, as Andrea, it's international. And I had the privilege of witnessing that firsthand in my homeland, the homeland of my ancestors. So 3 weeks ago, I returned from the Philippines, and coming back here, I was a month away, and not much changes in a month, but it was really a trip to see fascism at another level.
I was able to integrate with our group, the Kapit Bisig Kabataan Network, which was a youth and student organization that was founded after Typhoon Haiyan. Has anybody heard of Typhoon Haiyan? So it was one of the worst human-made disasters, natural disasters, they say. And so many folks still haven't received aid. So we got to integrate with the farmers, the fisher folks who live on the shores, and who talked about waves that were 3 stories high, that talked about roofs decapitating their neighbors. So this is a form of terrorism. On September 11, let's remember, when we hear mainstream media talk about terrorism, we can't look at it as an isolated incident. Philippines has been in a civil war for 500 years. And with oppression comes resistance. So our people have been fighting. We got to see firsthand how people were labeled as terrorists. We visited Zamboanga region, which is in Mindanao, what Tina spoke of earlier, the southernmost island in the Philippines. And we were there on a fact-finding mission to just listen to stories and interviews. After we had left, we found out that the government had actually tagged us as rebels so that they had an excuse to threaten, to harass, and to basically force these people, the Lumad, the self-ascribed and collective identity of the indigenous peoples of Mindanao, that's their excuse to kill them. There's been so many human rights violations in the Philippines, and a lot of it is connected to initiatives like Urban Shield here. So the Lumad, as Tina mentioned, the 3 that were displaced or that were actually murdered by the state. We have a campaign that's called Save Our Schools, because they're asking for the right to return to their ancestral domains because of the foreign companies that have been displacing them for years. For many centuries, actually. And the most, I think one of the deepest parts was also connecting the struggle of land grabbing there with urban displacement here or gentrification. Because it's one struggle. We talk about black and brown communities here, and we also have to look back 500 years ago when the Ohlone people were first, when the Europeans came and colonized them. So we got to connect the struggles internationally. So what's a call to action? What can we do? There's a lot of organizing happen. I want you all to look around here and notice that there's always folks missing, that there's always more room for growth in this movement. Whether it's differently abled folks who aren't able to come to these actions, whether it's folks with mental health traumas, and we're all living with relative traumas, yes? But we want to recognize that we're fighting the state out there. We're fighting these structures, and we're also fighting that internalized colonialism, internalized capitalism here, and within our own communities. Because it's hard, it's easy to say, so, you know, that white cop, but when it's in this, now we have a black president, and a lot of our folks back home didn't even know about, didn't learn about slavery because the education system is controlled by the U.S. So we gotta reclaim. We got to really use our voice to speak out and connect these local issues abroad. And in our study, we also have to remember to be critical of ourselves and of each other, so that we don't perpetuate these nasty oppressions and repression that the state puts on us. It lives within our bodies, it lives within our minds, and we're here for the long run. It's not going to end tomorrow, the system, so we have to learn to be in struggle with each other. There's a word from one of the Lumad leaders that he actually found. It's in Tagalog, so it's called makisama, and he said that's one of the most important values he believes as an organizer is to be with their comrades, to be in struggle with your people. And it's not just through the good times, but when you're in your meetings, when you're organizing with folks, you're in it for the long run. So we wanna remember to look into our history of internationalism, of anti-imperialism, and also connect those struggles all across the world. Thank you.
They're with Cop Watch. I actually just moved here from New York, and a lot of folks are holding down the Cop Watchers there in New York City, and it really is a form of resistance, how neighborhoods can really not just watch the cops, but hold them accountable, and it's our form of fighting back. Please give a round welcome for Andrea Pritchard.
First of all, I really want to thank the organizers who brought us here today. And I want to thank the visionaries, because it's so forward-looking to understand the connections and to bring them together from the international to the very local. For 30 years, I've lived in my community and I've been watching the police. I live in the city of Berkeley, which was once considered to be a liberal, a progressive, even a radical town. But sadly, it has changed. It has changed very dramatically. And let me tell you a story from late July. A man goes into a laundromat and he's desperate, and he takes out a gun and he wants to steal money from the woman there. And apparently she wasn't readily giving up her money. And so he actually showed her the bullets in his gun. He's like, look, I've got a gun and I'm gonna shoot. He ended up getting $40 and he pushed her on the ground and he ran off. It's a $40 laundromat robbery. Sadly, it happens all the time. Meanwhile, in Richmond, the Berkeley Police Department's newly christened Special Response Team caught wind of this. With a quickness, they came to Berkeley. 15 desert camouflage-clad officers. They looked like Marines. They came, they were able to somehow get a tank. They got dogs. They did house-to-house searches. They secured the perimeter. That was a $40 laundromat robbery. But you see, they're in training for this activity. It's kind of an opportunity to get their chops up, because they won a couple years ago and they're very excited about the possibility that they might bring home a trophy. They dedicate 1 day a month to training for disaster preparedness. They train 1 full day a month. Now, the chief of our department says that he could not get even 15 officers to undergo a 40-hour training in how to handle mental health crisis. And yet, by their own statistics, 35% of Berkeley Police Department's calls for service have to do with people who are in mental crisis. 35%. But these cops aren't interested in that, the realities of our community. They're interested in these hypothetical scenarios. And sadly, God forbid there really is an earthquake. Because, we got that Katrina thing in our head, right? And if there was a disaster, these knuckleheads would come out to the hungry people and give them bullets. They would come out to the injured with tanks. That's what's happening to us. And so I am so grateful for you, and I am so determined that next year I'm going to come here and tell you that we brought a resolution to the Berkeley City Council to end Berkeley's participation in Urban Shield. I'm going to do everything I can, and I hope that we spread it from city to city. And like Devontae was saying, it's national, and national is made up of thousands and thousands of locals. So stay strong. Thank you so much. Stop Urban Shield.